Good evening and welcome to the last talk of Byzantium at Ankara. Today I am especially honored, excited and thrilled to host a dear scholar, friend Cenk and Dr. Şahin about a very particular topic, understanding Byzantine music. I will briefly introduce Cenk from Hacettepe University, very talented musician, but besides has a wide range of interests, publications, performances. So I just tried to put a selection of those, and it will be an opportunity for us to learn more about the Byzantine music, its repercussions on later musical conceptions and performances. But also, we are very happy to have Dr. Güray&Nevin Şahin, again, a very multidisciplinary scholar who has a multidisciplinary approach in her studies. So congratulations for her thesis, which was also awarded by Middle East Technical University as a thesis of the year. And her thesis was about music and power among the performances of performance of Mevlevi music, and has again a variety of interest areas. I'll just try to put some of those, and has ongoing research projects, and both our guests has many articles and book chapters, publications. So I will not talk on them in detail, but it will be a delightful opportunity to hear more about Byzantine music and understanding it, looking at the other media, such as the manuscripts or minor artworks, artifacts, which are depicting musical instruments as well, or scenes of performing music. So we will be able to understand more on that as well. Without further ado, I'll leave the floor to Cenk Güray&Nevin Şahin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sercan Hocam, for your very nice presentation and introduction. Thank you very much for the things that you say that had embarrassed me a bit. Thank you very much for that. I will take the first word, then leave to Nevin Şahin to say that Nevin Şahin is also a prospective assistant professor of our department too. Last week, at last, let's say, her position for assistant professorship in music theory department had been announced. And I think in the next few months, she will be a very successful assistant professor in our department. And I'm glad to say that she will especially work on comparative music theory side, and especially it will concentrate on Byzantine music theory. So it's a very great pleasure for me to listen to Nevin also today. So I'd like to thank all of you for, first of all, inviting us for the speech. We are very honored about that, and for all the audience that had came to listen to the speech. So thank you very much, and I leave the word to Nevin.
Thank you, Cenk Hocam. Let me start with sharing my screen. And my sound, of course. First of all, this meeting was originally planned to be held in May in Ankara. And unfortunately, we are all suffering from this health condition all around the world. But it's a great pleasure for me to host all of you in my home. And I'm really happy to be being a guest in your homes. I hope you enjoy our talk this evening, which will be more music than less speech. Let me give a short outline for what we're going to talk about today. We will first start from the musical life in Byzantium. I will really shortly mention where music was performed, in what forms, and what we have about that music in written format. And then I will leave the floor to Cenk Hoca, who will basically talk about the semantic and symbolic universe of music surrounding the Byzantine culture, and then he will connect this universe to philosophy, especially in the name of Boethius. Afterwards, he will continue with the written music in the Byzantine period, and he will mention theory and notation. In the end, I will wrap the topic up with the post-Byzantine context, and we will be showing you some traditional examples, some examples from the ecclesiastical music tradition, and some reinterpretations of Byzantine music. So let me continue with music in the Byzantine Empire. What we know about music in the Byzantine Empire is actually segregated, I can say. We know much about the religious music, the ecclesiastical music, I mean, because that has been written for more than a millennium, I can say. Besides that, we know about imperial ceremonies, which were documented in different sources like manuscripts with illustrations and different iconography. However, we don't know much about the folk music. That's basically related to the hierarchical structure of the Byzantine society, I can say, because the court was well esteemed as well as the clergy. The music they preferred and performed was worth being taken down. But the music of the folk was not esteemed that much. That's why we don't have much information about that. Researcher Dr. Kyriakos Kalaitidis was able to find several manuscripts, including folk music, which date back to the 17th century. But we don't have, other than these sources, much about folk music. And other than that, much of the knowledge we have about Byzantine musical rituals, the instruments, and the illustrations comes actually from Dr. Antonios Botonakis' stellar research, I can say, on the echoes or echoes of an empire, Byzantine musical instruments through the ages. And this illustration, particularly from the 12th century, was taken from the exhibition of his project. I would advise everybody to visit this exhibition, as well as check out his research to learn more about Byzantine music and Byzantine instruments. From that point on, I will be leaving the floor to Cenk Hoca to continue talking about the semantic and symbolic universe of the music. Hocam, the floor is yours. Please don't forget to remind me to change the slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Nevin. In fact, as Nevin told about that, Byzantine music depends on a large variety of styles, forms, instruments, and it has different eras that defining different styles of music and art. But in general, in the literature, what is symbolized by Byzantine music is especially the church music, especially in Greek Orthodox Church. So the most, maybe the most part of our speech will be dedicated to this area of Byzantine music, ecclesiastical music or church music in Byzantine era. And of course, we should also say that this music is so much open to cultural interactions, especially when we think about the geography where the Byzantine Empire was constructed. Of course, all the Anatolia, the Balkan geography, the Middle Eastern geography, old Mesopotamia, are all related to Byzantine culture. So this music in the Byzantine period and in the post-Byzantine period were always open to interactions, cultural similarities and differences and cultural interactions. And what first interested me in Byzantine music was the similarities with the Ottoman music, in fact. So in especially the post-Byzantine period, the Ottoman music was very influential in Byzantine church music. But in fact, Byzantine music gives a very important historical view for us regarding Anatolian music too. As you know, the makam structures are the main melody producing tools of Anatolian music. And in Byzantine music, we can detect the oldest written examples for this makam type of music. So makam culture that is still behind the production of the music in Anatolia, in every part of Anatolia, in fact, can be found in Byzantine music when the historical periods are compared. So we can first find the written examples of such a music culture in Byzantine period. So it's very important for us. And the second thing is the philosophy coming with Byzantine art and Byzantine music, of course. As you can know, Byzantine art concentrates on symbolizing. In fact, it depends very strongly to ancient Greek philosophy, especially to Plato. You know, the Platon's base of thought depends strongly on the ideas, what he calls the ideas. The word ideal also comes from there. Ideas are the humanly reflections of heavenly models. So art reflects these heavenly signs to the humanly world. So music, painting, and other kinds of art are just used for reflecting these heavenly culture, heavenly signs to the humanly world. So when we come about the religious purpose of music, it will just coincide with this thought. So Byzantine art and Byzantine music aims to bring together the believer, worshipper with what is called the heavenly thoughts or heavenly ideas, the holy ideas. And music is a very strong expression for this reflection, like the other kinds of Byzantine art, let's say. So let's pass this slide, in fact, Nevin. We should never forget that while thinking about Byzantine art, Byzantine culture is a medieval-based culture. And Mango has a very nice definition about that. According to a Byzantine human, in fact, to all medieval people too, the transcendental was ultimately real and ordinary. The other world, spiritual and heavenly, not only influenced the daily life, but also encompassed the sublime and eternal reality, of which worldly existence formed only the beginning. Every narrative of Byzantine worldview thus has to start with the transcendental, the heavenly, the holy. And as I have told a while ago, this idea is very harmonious with the concept of idea by Plato. We can skip this slide, maybe. Of course, when we come to the belief system of Byzantine era, we should define a very interesting and influential idea, the divine beauty. In fact, this concept of divine beauty was the first thing that attracted me to the area of Byzantine music and Byzantine music theory. Because as Sercan Hoca had told at the beginning, I my area of interest is music theory. And music theory has two sides. One side is the understanding of how the music is constructed, and the other side was the philosophical background of it. In fact, music theory manuscripts, starting from the old Mesopotamia, always aims to understand and try to discover and tell about the universe and cosmos. And music is a way of expressing the cosmos for human beings. And also, of course, this cosmos has a physical side and also, of course, has a spiritual side too. And what is called as the harmony of spheres by Pythagoras just coincides with this idea too. The cosmos works in a harmony, and this harmony was created by the God. And this harmony first was reflected in the nature and then reflected in the human beings, both in the souls and in the physical view of human beings. And the idea that connects the human beings with the eternal life lies in the spirit of human beings. There is an eternal source for the spirit of human beings, and as the human beings discover about this human source in their spirit, they become mature and mature. And they discover the universe, they discover the nature, and they discover the God. So that is why always in religious philosophies, we always announce that the human beings comes from God and returns to God. This is what we call the cyclic way of attitude for the human beings, for the nature, and for the God. Byzantine music is a very expressive identification source for this way of attitude by the concept that is called the divine beauty. According to divine beauty concept, all the beauties are belonging to God. And in the world, we have reflections of these beauties, just like the idea theory of Plato. And art shows these reflections to human beings and brings them side to side, face to face with the things that they call holy and they call eternal, just like the God, just like the Jesus Christ, just like the Mary. So Byzantine music tells about these eternal communications and places them in the religious ritual that we can trace within the Greek Orthodox Church, especially, and with all kinds of different church rituals, of course. But what will we concentrate is the Greek Orthodox Church today, especially. But we will start with another example, in fact. So let's skip this. Nevin, thank you very much. As you know, I work in music theory, and a side of music theory is the esoteric way of conception of nature that is embedded in the music theory. So I work on different religions and their way of expressions based on music. Of course, there are some orthodox way of belief systems and some heterodox way of belief systems. And in the Byzantine era, as I have told a while ago, monasteries had a very great strength in the Byzantine belief system, but not only serving to what is called the orthodox way of life, but also some very interesting examples of heterodox way of belief and life. There were very interesting belief systems that are contradicting with the main ideas of the church. One of them was the Catharism system that lies somewhere between Christianity and Islamic belief systems, and especially very strong in Balkans during the late Byzantine period especially. And of course, there are Bogomils and other kinds of very interesting belief systems where we can find very interesting examples of religious music. Not from the churches, not from the Orthodox repertoire, but from the repertoire of minstrels belonging to these religious ideas. So we had called this belief of human beings for coming from God and returning to God at last as the theory of cycles. And here is a song from Cathar minstrels, a Cathar minstrel that we don't know the name, just telling this theory of cycles from a natural way of perspective. It's a shepherd song, in fact. You know, shepherds has a very interesting and strong conception of nature, just as like Jesus Christ, who is a shepherd himself too. And also, you know, in Christianity, there is a very interesting symbols of cosmos and objectives of the cosmos, including the stars, for example. You know, the birth of Jesus Christ was discovered by three kings who had discovered the shape of the stars. Just like something like a fortune telling. And this is a very interesting musical example, just symbolizing such a cosmic way of knowledge acquirement through the stars. The Arcturus star of the Boethius constellation. And the meaning of the song is Larus Daphne will live out again 700 years later, which very strongly concentrates on the cyclic way of nature's life. So let's listen to it. Nevin.
Lanto sana gayado Lanto sana gayado Trova safeno al del Safeno al del tutto desconsolato tutto desconsolato.
Hey, Nevin, I think it's enough. As we have many examples, I think it's enough for the start. This song now comes from the Occidental part of France and through some minstrels that still are performing these songs. So this Catharism system had been widespread through the inner side of Europe too. We should also emphasize another philosopher, which is Pythagoras, especially the heavenly harmony and harmony of the spheres that makes the basement for the thoughts of the divine beauty comes from Pythagoras, in fact. Especially after the 1st century, the Neo-Pythagoreanism, and after the 3rd century, the Neoplatonism had a very great impact of carrying the ancient Greece thoughts back to Byzantine again. So the Byzantine culture had again returned to the initial ideas that makes the construction of this empire possible. The first idea was the ancient Greek culture and the strong connection of Byzantine with the ancient Greek culture. And especially the musical symbolism is very much to do with Pythagoras and Plato. And there are very interesting followers of this idea. Let's skip this slide. For example, a very interesting follower of this idea is Boethius, a philosopher from Rome, interestingly. He has lived for many years in Rome, but was a follower of the mystical-based ideas of the Byzantine Church. So he was accused due to that. They said that you have relation with another church that is contradicting, in fact, with the Roman Christianity. So you're a problematic person. So at last, unfortunately, he was killed through these discussions. There were many followers of these mystical ideas coming from Pythagoras and Plato, and that had dominated the Byzantine culture and especially in the music. So what he says, all beings with intelligence accept that God is eternal. So let us think about eternity, because this will help us understand both the divine essence and the divine knowledge accurately. Eternity means complete possession all at once of illimitable life. Hence we can say that as a non-interrupted whole owning limitless life without missing any pieces of past or future, a being is eternal. Such a being will be always there and ready without any change, and the flow of time with its past, present, and future will identify a sole presence for it, without beginning and without end, a very similar identification of God to other types of religious cultures like Islamic Sufism. Let's skip this, Nevin'cim. So Boethius can be selected as an example that summarizes the main idea behind the Byzantine music and art. Art is the medium of understanding the universe and humans' inner world, thus understanding the religion and God. It can be understood that the iconography and hymns in Byzantine art aim at bringing believers to confront the sacred or spiritual. Such artistic efforts do not have a priority of being glorious. So they are not trying to design a perfect artistic production. They do not want to get into a race with the eternal creation. They only symbolize it. They only symbolize the embodiment of the glory of the sacred within a simplicity. Because of that, also the iconography carries a very interesting simplicity, but also a beauty, of course. Music is just like that. It just depends on very simple and accurate melodic lines and very elegantly intersecting with the verbal or the literal material. I have a very interesting memory about Boethius. In fact, years ago, while I was working as the advisor of the Ministry of Culture of Turkey, a group of academicians had arrived from Germany, representing a society called, I will remember now, a society called the Byzantine Music Representatives in Europe. So they have arrived to the ministry with a file, and this file was full of Boethius's works. And most of these works was about Hagia Sophia Church, Hagia Sophia Church in Istanbul. And there were very interesting designs of Boethius about this church. He had designed very detailedly the Hagia Sophia for a musical performance. He had just pointed out where the members of the choir should stay and what kinds of sound ranges, voice ranges should sing at what speed and at what strength, and they should they should be placed in what kind of places. Very interesting design for a choir performance. And this society had asked to perform again this ritual in Hagia Sophia. Of course, it wasn't permitted, as Hagia Sophia is unfortunately always a place where the religious is mixed with politics, even in Byzantine time. But that was a very interesting study, and that study made me to get more into contact with Boethius's works too. And Boethius has some compositions also, and some also, of course, theory books too, music theory books too. Of course, these music theory books carries a great power in symbolizing the nature. And there is a very interesting documentary about Boethius, and there are some examples you can find about the songs of Boethius too. Of course, their notations are not very accurate, I should say. So they are just, let's say the performers are just trying to guess how this music should be on that period. But let's skip to this slide and listen to a very solid example. This is a virtual design of Boethius' studies about Hagia Sophia. And this is an example of a choir performance according to the design of Boethius regarding this virtual choir, let's say. Let's listen.
We perceive water, especially the water of
I
the
think
sea.
it's enough, Nevin. It is a part of the documentary, and you can, of course, watch it if you like, as we have limited amount of time. Let's skip. But I should very honestly say that the Byzantine church music is a very interesting media that can strengthen to your belief in God. If you have very expressive, very interesting, and very strong way of religious symbolism. So the main transmission of this divine beauty to the stage of liturgy are realized by Greek Orthodox church music, the main branch of art symbolizing the Byzantine music. Let's skip this slide. Of course, we should also say that the divine wisdom, so the divine and eternal wisdom of God is a very natural pair with this divine beauty. Cannot be separated, two things. And especially these two things, the eternal beauty of God and the eternal wisdom of God, had very great influence in the Islamic Sufism too, that had embodied the famous way of thought of Vahdet-i Vücut, the totality of the body, let's say. We can translate like that, and trying to discover the God in every part of the universe. We can summarize it maybe. A very interesting thought, always also supported by Mevlana Celaleddin Rumi. These days are his commemorating days, as you know. So what can we say about Greek Orthodox Church music? What are the main characteristics of this music? Let's give some small technical details, if you like. The liturgical music tradition in the Eastern churches starts with the Syriac church, nearly at the 1st century after Christ, of course. The main liturgical scenarios of the rituals were mainly carried out by music and iconography, bringing the holy idea to the believer in the church. So its function is very strong and very important. You cannot leave aside the music in a Byzantine ritual, religious ritual. The Byzantine Orthodox music is a homophonic kind of music. What is homophonic music? There is a sound sound that is not changing and goes all through the music performance. It goes. And there is a main melody accompanying to this sound. Of course, in a certain way of harmony together. This music is mainly performed by a choir. Sometimes there are solo performances, but mainly the Byzantine church music is a choir music. Composed of worshippers, they are mainly males. There are some very exceptional choirs for women too, but it is not so common, I should say. It is a recitative music, just like something like similar to talking, let's say. It's based on makam culture, sang in an improvised manner over a detailed repertoire of religious poetry. And what is constructing the forms is the forms of this religious poetry, in fact. These religious poetry dedicated to different kinds of religious purposes makes the main material on which the Byzantine church music is created. And these materials of these literal materials are selected to be performed in different rituals, which we will give some examples a while later. Especially, it's miswritten. After the 5th century, the religious and the music center moves to Istanbul. All the liturgical music in the empire were being coordinated with the written musical notations and lyrics that are sent from Istanbul to all the churches, mainly in Anatolia and the neighboring geographies. So because of that, this music was one of the oldest musical styles that were transformed into written material, written notations. Very early the notation starts in the Byzantine music. After the 5th and 6th centuries, we have a notation. And because of that reason, we can also identify Byzantine church music as the oldest written makam type of music. So very valuable for Anatolian music. Let's skip this slide. Thank you, Nevin. Starting from the 4th century, notation is used in Orthodox religious music. Neume is the name of this notation. It is not a classical notation that you can observe in a Western style of music. This notation is depending on symbols, very well fitting to the symbolic representation of music, let's say. Firstly, these neumes, these signs, were developed upon the ancient Greek system of letters and prosodic signs. But in time, it had changed a bit. Going through their 3 different phases until the 19th century, Byzantine notation helped hymns survive and people confront the divine beauty. A rather flexible system this is, only as reminder in early periods. Byzantine pneumatic notation evolved into a detailed system of writing music, and it is still used. Maybe Nevin will tell about that for the post-Byzantine period. Let's give a small example from a troparion. Troparion is a kind of Byzantine church music form, a literal form for a short hymn, usually based on a stanza. And this hymn was taken from the Ambrosianus manuscript of the 14th century. It is about the Christmas Eve, the birth of Jesus Christ, and telling about these three Eastern kings that herald the birth of Jesus by seeing it from the stars, let's say, by a fortune telling. So let's listen to this example. It is Echoes 3. Is enough, Nevin. It's finished already. Thank you. I cannot stop it in some place because it's always continuous. It's a recitative form, so just like talking, it goes and goes. So I do not want to hide the meaning too. So we try to listen to the whole example as much as possible, let's say. And Byzantine music depends on makam culture that I have told you. But in Byzantine period, makams were not named as makams. They were named as echoes, just coming from the word echo, coming from ancient Greece. Word again. And these echoes have great similarities with the later period Ottoman makams too, that we will discuss it a while later again. But I should say that Byzantine and ancient Greek music cultures have a very similar melodic material. When the interval system and the way of melodic organization was considered. A diatonic scale is at the base of the Byzantine music culture, just like the ancient Greece system. Of course, when the time passes, the requirements of melodies as always enters as new promotions to the music theory. Byzantine church music, just like ancient Greek music, is influenced by literary patterns. Again, I should emphasize that. The Byzantine music theory is a natural follower of the ancient Greek theory, representing especially the divine beauty and the harmony of pairs. Apart from a few exceptions, the Byzantine music theory manuscripts are either translations of ancient Greek writings or methods for teaching the Byzantine church music. When talking about the Byzantine music theory and the theoretical writings, we should emphasize this fact. Most of them are translations. The translations of Pythagoras, the translations of Plato, the translations of Aristoxenus, later on Nicomachus, let's say. So they are repeating something like. And many of the other writings are not original, in fact, and they are just methods, methods of education for church hymns, church music. Which makams are used? How are they used? What kind of a repertoire we are singing? So it is just related with this teaching purpose. And many of the Byzantine theory writings are dedicated to the teaching of Byzantine church music. We can skip it. Yeah. And of course, we can understand from this fact that the theoretical writings in Byzantine period are very practical because it tries to teach the worshipper, the performer, how to make the church music. So it just tries to tell us about the melodies and how do we construct these melodies. They do not give details about the mathematical side of the music theory. As you know, music theory has a very interesting physical side, linking to frequencies, and very interesting mathematical side we can see in the works of Pythagoras. But Byzantine writings are not related to these types of mathematical or physical details. It tells about the melodies. How are they formed? How should we teach them? Of course, another reason for not including the new ideas in theory should be the fact that Byzantine music is mainly a religious music that should not change. They should not be changed by the performance. So there are not so many deviations in the theory too. So we have Patlamius, Plato, and Aristoxenus translations, and there are also some manuscripts with original ideas like Hagia Polites and Papadike, like 9th or 10th century after Christ, and they have not interesting new ideas about the musical performance and makam-based conception of music. Let's skip this too, Nevin. And Hagia Polites say that we name the sounds not according to their quantity, but according to their quality. This quantity is in fact, message to Pythagoras' way of mathematical thinking. He says that quality is important. We name sounds as high or deep, rough, or tender, or glorious. It is not important where the sound is, or how much it is, or what is the frequency of that sound. Hence, the importance of echoes doesn't lie in the quantity, doesn't lie in the mathematics, doesn't lie in the physics, but in the quality of the melody they produce. So this is a very interesting melody-oriented approach for theory that will be the main idea for theoretical transmission of makam theory even in the Ottoman period. So Byzantine resources of theory had a great impact in Ottoman theory too. And these interactions are getting much and much stronger in the later centuries, we should say, which Nevin will tell about. Let's skip this. Well, let's give some technical details. I will not get into so much details, but it is again a slide from a current source of Byzantine theory, giving the main scale of Byzantine diatonic scale, the Byzantine music, let's say, especially the church music. This basic diatonic scale is formed by the combination of two tetrachords, just like in the ancient Greece theory, the lower tetrachord and the upper tetrachord. And these are the authentic names of the sounds. The below one are the Western type of names, and the above ones, ni, pa, vu, ga, di, ke, zo, ni, are the authentic names for the notes. Let's skip this. And here are the characteristics of the scales, very similar to ancient Greece theory again taken from a current source of Byzantine music theory. There are very interesting sources for Byzantine music theory now. My dear friend, dear Professor Thomas Apostopoulos is a great expert of this area. I should announce his name. And we are now working on a common book that has a very strong chapter on Byzantine music theory, mainly led by Thomas Apostopoulos and dear Kyriakos Kalatsidis. Let's skip this. Now, another example, let's say, this time commemorating the Holy Friday, or what they call the Good Friday, what is called the Good Friday. Unfortunately, the sacrification of the crucifixion of Christ, just symbolizing, let's say, and a very famous hymn, starting with, they have stripped me of my garments, of my clothes, they have taken my clothes. And it's this hymn tells about this crucifixion idea, passion and suffering and loneliness of Jesus Christ, unfortunately there. And it is one of the most influential hymns of the Byzantine repertoire, let's say. We are very fortunate that this performance is from a CD that is produced by us. The head of the topic of the CD is the relation of belief and music in Anatolia. And this hymn was performed by my dear friend Yorgo Hacıhuronoğlu, a very nice singer of Byzantine church music, and he is the main head singer of the Great Church of Christ in Athens. And his musical education was, of course, from Istanbul. So many of the church musicians in Athens and in other sites of Greece comes to Patriarch in Istanbul to take the main musical practice again still now. So let's listen to this hymn. This is the second plagal mode. We have 8 main modes, dear friends, regarding the Byzantine music culture. In fact, using 8 modes is a very old tradition of the Eastern churches. All the Eastern churches have 8 modes, but the quality, not say the quality, the technical side of this modes can change from church to church. Armenians use other 8 modes, or Syriacs use other 8 modes. So we have 8 special modes related to Byzantine church. 4 of them are authentic, 4 of them are plagal, which means it is carried to an other sound or fret, transposed, we can say. And this is from the second plagal and second plagal mode, second transpose mode, and most of the hymns for the Holy Friday is sang in this mode, which coincides with Hicaz or Hicazkar in Turkish music. And of course, this hymn is sang for the rituals relating to this event of Holy Friday, I should say. So let's listen to it a bit. is so beautiful that I cannot stop it before the end. But I think you can hear these homophonic lines. There is a choir that gives the same sound always. Sometimes this sound can change according to melody, but mainly there is a sound there at the background, and a singer sings a melodic line over it. So most of the performances of Byzantine choir I like that. There are sometimes soloists, or sometimes a part of the choir sings this melodic line, and the other part just makes the accompanying sound, let's say. A final example, maybe for the moment, let's say, so I can give the word to Nevin to use the time efficiently. Again, at Troparion, as I have told later, there are some literal forms. Troparion is a very interesting literal forms of based on a stanza. There is a very interesting rhythm and relations of every line with each other. It says different formulas, and the melodic production is related to this formula. So it is both a literal form and a musical form. And cherubicon is another type of hymn that is in troparion form, but differs from the other troparions with its subject. The subject of cherubicon is a very special hymn, is the great entrance of the divine liturgy, the famous ceremony that gives the portion of the holy sacrifice of the Eucharist with the bread and wine. So a very interesting start where the Christ is symbolized coming with all the holy beings with himself, including the seraphs standing round about him, and it tells about this scenario. By the way, the previous example, can we come to the previous example, Nevin, a while, please? Chrysanthos of Meditos tells that this mode, the second plagal mode of the hymn, the mode of the hymn that we have listened before, it's appropriate for funerals and sacramentuals, he says. Again, I should emphasize that this gives the meaning of the loneliness, suffering, and the passion of Christ. And he asks, I am alone there, and all of you left me alone in this cross. And kind of very interesting and influential way of expressing these loneliness and suffering, let's say. So let's skip this one, Nevin, and let's listen to this cherubicon. Uniting is enough. It is a long hymn, so we can only, I think, reflect a part of it, unfortunately. But I think it is, it can be understood, the makam structure, especially. This was from the first authentic mode, the first mode of the Byzantine Church, and it coincides with the uşak type of, or old Dügah type of makam structures in Ottoman music, let's say. I should say that Byzantine church performance reflects a very complex understanding of the makam. So mostly, for example, when we say that the first echo or the first mode of a Byzantine church performance, we should understand that within this echo, there are many makam structures. For example, if we have uşak, we can have dügah, we can have acem, we can have neva. Similar makam structures come and go within this performance. So, in fact, a Byzantine makam is a very complex structure, just like a musical form, mixed, can be represented as a mix of different makams, let's say. And I should also say that some of the makams that are not performed in the classical Turkish music scene for the current time are still continuing in the Byzantine church performances. For example, acem makam. I have not heard a composition on old acem makam for many years. The only exception is the church performances. So popular culture does not touch the church performance, fortunately. So we have 4 authentic modes. The first mode is similar to uşak in classical Turkish music or folk music, let's say. The second is something like segah and hüzzam. The third is rast and acem aşiran. Fourth mode is similar to hüzzam, ferahnak, and urak. And 4 plagal modes, Gülizar Yegah, the first plagal. The second is, we have listened to the example about the Holy Friday, Hicaz Ker Hüseyni Aşiran. Plagal 3, Rast Acem Aşiran. The first example you can remember with the notations on the front was on this mode, Plagal 3, similar to Rast and Acem Aşiran makam structures, and Plagal 4, Eviç Rast. Years later, 4 new modes were added to this structure, especially at the 19th century, with an effect from the Ottoman culture. Let's skip that. Yes, this now gives a stop for my speech. Sorry for maybe using the time a bit longer than expected. Sorry, Nevin. I will give the word to Nevin now for the final periods. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Hocam. In a ternary manner, let's say, I will be wrapping up the discussions from a rather contemporary point of view. We are jumping up to the 18th century, where the first written examples of comparison between Byzantine ecclesiastical music and Ottoman makam music started to come out. Those treatises of the 18th century were basically influenced by the Moldavian prince Dimitri Cantemir, who wrote an excellent book on Ottoman music theory in the early 18th century. And he influenced actually most of the theoretical tradition in the Ottoman times. Yevgenia Popescu that names his influence as a change in the theoretical understanding from the taxonomic model to the transformative model. From Cantemir on, there is less influence of the mathematical tradition going back to Pythagoras. The systematic school has been abandoned, and the makams are, from that point on, explained in a more quality-based manner. I mean, the flow of the melody, the intervals between pitches, rather than tetrachords, pentachords, and their frequential relations. So this change also influenced the transcultural studies between Byzantine music and Ottoman makam music. The first written example we know so far is from Panayotis Halacioğlu, who was an Istanbulite musician and clergy, I can say, who was trained in Mount Athos and came back to Istanbul. He wrote a treatise which had a section on the comparison between Ottoman makams and Byzantine ihos. So the information Cenk Hoca gave to you a few seconds ago can be dated back to that treatise of the 18th century. His student, Kyrillos Marmarinos, continued that tradition of comparing these two musical structures, but there is something interesting in those treatises I need to mention. During that time, the only terminology used for music was musiki. So there weren't any religious references, there weren't any ethnic references, but so as to be able to compare the two different music traditions, Halacioğlu used a different term. He referred to the makam music as Persian music, and his student Marmarinos referred to the non-Byzantine music, let's say, as Arabo-Persian music. Let's keep this in mind and jump to the 19th century. During the 19th century, as most of you certainly know, the Ottoman Empire was on the verge of declining, and it was losing most of its land to newly emerging nation states, let's say. Greece was among them. So Greece became a separate nation state in the 19th century. And at that point, the wave of nationalism influenced music production as well. They needed to establish a Greek national music, let's say. So the basis was Greek folk music together with Byzantine ecclesiastical music. At that point, we expect to have a difference in the comparative studies between Byzantine music and Ottoman makam music. But what are the reflections of ideology on music theory? That's a big question mark, I can say. We have Apostolos Konstas, let me check my notes once again. Konstantinos Protopsaltis and Panayotis Kiljanidis during that period in the 19th century. Their works refer to the external music, exoteric musiki. When we say external music, it kind of has a pejorative connotation. You can think that, okay, Byzantine Greek music is something superior and the rest is something inferior because of this nationalistic connection, but that's not the case. I can say that this concept, exoteric musiki, was mainly used for segregating the Byzantine ecclesiastical music from secular music. That's why Ottoman makam music also fell into this external music terminology. But it's interesting that those scholars preferred to segregate the Arabic and Persian music traditions from the Ottoman music tradition. That's an interesting turn in the nationalistic discussions. Let's say we can understand that in the post-Byzantine era, the Byzantine music was somehow connected to the Ottoman makam music tradition, geographically at least, so that they could separate the faraway Arabic and Persian music traditions and relate Byzantine ecclesiastical music to the Ottoman makam music. This is a rather tricky topic, and we tried to explain this in detail in our article, which is forthcoming hopefully this year from Istanbul University Press. And for a better explanation of the relationship between Byzantine ihos and Ottoman makams, we also contributed to the Makam Atlas that Cenk Hoca mentioned a few moments ago, with an analysis of Phanariot songs, again based on the really invaluable work of Professor Thomas Apostolopoulos and Dr. Kyriakos Kalaitsidis. When they're out, I would suggest those interested in learning more about Byzantine music to go through our works, and your feedback would be more than welcome once our articles are out. So I'm coming to the end with a reinterpretation of Byzantine music, let's say. So I will end with Byzantine Christmas carol in Ichos 1 and Ichos Plagal 1. from a late 17th century manuscript, which was rediscovered by Dr. Kyriakos Kalaitsidis and performed by his ensemble as well. Those ears trained in traditional Turkish music will find a lot of similarities in terms of pitch, performance preferences, and I don't think this will sound traditionally Christmassy for those Western music trained ears, let's say, but I would like to end my presentation with this reinterpretation of Byzantine traditional music, and I would like to say Merry Christmas, Frohe Weihnachten to those who believe, and other people like who are celebrating Hanukkah, Happy Hanukkah to them, Happy Shabi Yelda to them who celebrate, and hopefully Happy New Year to all of us with best wishes for the upcoming year.
So, dear Cenk and Nevin, it was such a nurturing, enlightening, simply thrilling lecture and refreshing as well. So I myself took it as an omen, a good one, for 2021, that we'll have a better human lives. So, and I'm sure that there are questions from the audience. So I would like to open the floor for the Q&A sessions if there are questions or comments for this wonderful lecture from Cenk, Güray&Nevin, Şahin. You can write in the chat box or use the reactions icon to stand up and ask your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So would you like to add a few words, Luca? Can I give the floor to you? Would you like to say something?
No, I mean, I was just looking at the chat, if there was a button for clapping, and yes, the recording will be on YouTube if, as Nevin was mentioning, if the copyright is not going to come in the way. I mean, yes, it's going to be. Cenk, I have a question. I mean, for the both of you, if I may, if there is no other, there is no other question. I mean, in terms of, I like the fact that you move from Boethius basically to the relationship between the Ottoman, between the Byzantine and the Ottoman music. I mean, can you elaborate a bit more upon if you can, obviously, on this transformation of the music? I mean, obviously the Byzantine music that Boethius was listening to was most probably not the same that the one or a little bit different from the one. So how, I mean, if you can, I know that it's very, very elaborate, as I would rather say, and a little bit difficult to summarize it in few minutes. But if you can, I mean, especially with regard to the ecclesiastical music, if you can, this transformation, these changes or main trends of change.
Thank you. In fact, this was what we were discussing with Nevin this morning too. What I believe is these musical structures were also active before the Ottoman period too in Anatolia. Because in ancient Greece theory, we can very detailedly identify the intervals or the sounds that are still being used in Turkish music performance. All the instruments, tuning systems, and the sound material just gives us a resemblance about the ancient Greece theory and practice, musical practice, of course, with the future, with the afterwards performances or theory. So what I believe is when the Turks and the Islamic thought had arrived in Anatolia, there were there were still this music being performed in Anatolia, makam-based music. But of course, afterwards, the interactions had been continuing. So these musical styles had resembled each other so much after years. But the seeds of this music was still there. What I believe is that, but especially after the 20th and 12th centuries, when the Turks and other groups had migrated to Anatolia, they had brought their own music, and also there were many different musical styles in Anatolia, and the final mix was performed between these musical ideas. And the religion was a very interesting factor for this mix. As far as I can see, all the musical improvements start from the religious music. Because in Anatolia, people use music as a way of understanding the nature. So it's a way of symbolizing the nature. So they use these musical structures as a way of understanding the God and understanding the nature and understanding the spirit of human beings anyway. And they are taking examples from what they observe. And in Anatolia, the things that they were observing was the monastery culture of early Christianity, and of course the big musical treasure of Byzantine culture. And especially in city music culture, the Byzantine music performance characteristics was very influential in early Ottoman repertoire too, we can say that. So I can maybe discuss a bit like that. Maybe Nevin can add something.
Well, at this point, I don't have any further discussion to add, but there is a very interesting comment from Christine Tumschlesser in the chat, as I can see. She refers to Cappella Romana, from which we selected most of our examples. As far as I know, the Stanford project was held together with Cappella Romana. If I'm wrong, please correct me. And thank you for referring to the excellent work, Lost Voices of Hagia Sophia. I would like to thank you once more.
So as far as I can see, there are many thanks and Happy New Year and Merry Christmas wishes coming in the chat box. So I myself again be reminded how important was the Byzantine music when explaining again the Byzantine painting to give the theory of image and how inseparable are the theory of image, icon, and the theory of music, the divine liturgy, and the divine divine beings as well. So once again, thank you very much, dear Cenk and dear Nevin, and congratulations to Nevin as well for her promotion.
So Jan, we have two questions.
Yes,
sorry.
two questions.
Okay. Yeah.
One is from, I mean, Musa Osman Karatusun has raised his hand, and then we have one from Denise Erojal in the chat.
Okay, I'm following. Yes, from
Okay,
yes.
Can you hear me? I'm Musa.
Do you think it can be used in the study of? Yeah.
I'd like to first of all thank both professors and congratulations again.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask something. I myself studied Gregorian chant and Catholic music in my doctoral thesis. I found that even Catholics have 8 modes. And you mentioned in your slide, Byzantine music had 8 modes, and you called them echoes. I'd like to ask what were the differences? Do you know of between differences of Catholic and Byzantine music modes? Most of them.
Catholic modes, Catholic Church modes are again depending on the old ancient Greece characteristics. But in fact, Catholic Church music is not a makam-based music. It is mostly based on tonal and modal structures. And these have different kinds of musical functions when compared to makam culture. So with the effect of especially the Western music, these musical characteristics were transformed to a more tonal way, let's say. So the characteristics, the sound characteristics are completely different because of that. I can make such a maybe explanation. I think your voice were closed, dear Musa.
And can you say that they have other instruments than their counterpart from Byzantine? Of course,
especially Western type of instruments are being used in Catholic churches, even in Turkey. For example, Keldani Church uses piano. Syriani churches had started to use, for example, Western instruments too. So some of the Orthodox churches also use instruments. It's a new fashion, let's say. But using these Western instruments also had a great influence in this transformation too, of course.
Thank you, Professor.
Towards the Western music. Yes, thank you very much.
So
I would like
move to Bardia Hafizi,
Yes,
if I'm not mistaken. It's about the Byzantine music being culturally interactive one. Do you think it can be used in the study of other musics in the region, especially Mesopotamian music and pre-Islamic Persian music, is the question.
Yes. Very nice question. Thank you, Bardia. In fact, is what we are trying to do. When we think about the ancient Greece theory, we can see that it depends on mostly to the ancient Mesopotamian theory too, especially the education of Pythagoras and the background of Pythagoras has a great relation with the early Mesopotamian philosophers and, of course, the musical ideas too. And I also observed that through my studies, the old Mesopotamian culture especially has a symbolic effect on nearly all the religious musical styles of Anatolia. And Byzantine music culture is, of course, is an item in these important religious musical cultures of Anatolia. So there is a great and strong relation with Mesopotamia, and especially the theoretical side of it should be more and more emphasized, because we have materials from Mesopotamia, and we are seeing a very interesting and influential way of natural conception through music, which is very similar in Hittites and which is very similar in ancient Greece. So the line coming from Mesopotamia goes directly through Anatolia to ancient Greek culture, we can say, through music especially.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Nevin can add something.
Well, not exactly on this topic, but since I'm mostly working on the 18th and 19th century, I can say that the transculturality in these sources is quite dominant, as they started to compare different music traditions, and this tradition hasn't been abandoned so far. When we look at the early 20th century Turkish Muslim music sources, we can see the influence of this nationalistic ideology pretty much. They try to ignore every influence of other musical traditions on Turkish music, but all of their works were confuted so far. So we are clearly knowing that there is this interaction going on for centuries, and finding the ties in between and mapping the networks between those musical traditions is quite important, so as to understand the musicological background of these traditions, let's say.
Thank you. So the next question is from Deniz Erojal. Are there any documents discussing possible contacts between Ottoman musicians and the Greek Orthodox musical establishment on how transmission of influences worked?
Maybe Nevin had told something about it, but maybe she can elaborate it a bit. Huh?
Well, I can refer to Kyrillos Marmarinos at this point. We also mentioned this in our article in the Musicologist Journal. He starts his treatise by referring to several masters he studied the music together with. And he says there are large disputes among these music masters. That's why he preferred to take down what is meaningful for him. So he says it might be different from what the master says, but he finds this meaningful. That's why he doesn't hesitate to divert from what they're explaining. So even in the very first comparative works, we can see the connection. And I can also say once more that those Greek Orthodox music theorists were mostly trained in Istanbul. That's why they have close connections with other musical communities in the city. And the 18th, 19th century Istanbul was quite colorful with Armenians, Greeks, the Jewish people, the Turkish Muslim people, the court. So there were many different bases of music production, and all of them were in interaction with each other. And we can also trace these in the manuscripts of the period, I can say.
Right. Thank you, Nevin. So there is one question, actually two questions from Mehmet Yüksel. Do we have some musical examples that are so close that we cannot differentiate which is Ottoman and which is Byzantine music? So the examples of musical examples from both spheres. And another question from Mehmet again is: there any study researching for main discrepancies between Ottoman and Byzantine music? So there are comparative studies between these two areas, Ottoman and Byzantine music. These two questions are coming from Mehmet Yüksel. Thank you. Thank you again, Cenk.
Thank you Mehmet Hocam. Sağ olun Seryan Hocam. Thank you. Maybe these Phanariot songs can be given as an example that you cannot decide other from the language sometimes. And some of them have Turkish lyrics too. And you cannot decide whether this is a Byzantine type of music or Ottoman music. It's so much mixed within each other. And of course, we have many interesting Ottoman composers and related to Greek ethnic origin. For example, the famous composer Zaharia of the 18th century. And you cannot decide that this Zaharia is Greek or Turk or Armenian. It is a very strong style that a compositional style of the 18th century is so strong that it surpasses all the ethnical identities and other types of styles, let's say. So I can maybe give such an answer. Nevin, maybe you can add something.
Well, I can come to the 21st century at this point and refer to Dr. Marcus Coullios' work, who compares the Byzantine ecclesiastical music theory, let's say, with Ottoman Makam music theory, together with Indian music theory. So his work is quite interesting to show the similarities and differences between those model music traditions, let's say. As far as I know, he also writes in English, so his work can be checked at this point.
Thank you, Cenk, and thank you, Nevin. One last question and suggestion comes from Maria Xantu. So go ahead, Maria.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. Happy New Year from Selanik to everyone. I would like to thank Professor Güray, who reminded us that the ancient Greek music does have roots in Anatolia, although in our, national narratives, this is not it's not stressed as it should be. Coming from the ancient Greek literature part, I must attest that this is attested not only in works like Aristoxenos, but even in Pindar, in the works of Pindar and Aristophanes, we do read about Mixolydian rhythms. And we also know that reconstruction of attempts for reconstruction of ancient Greek music are made by, today, Stefan Hagel in Vienna, and also Armand Dangour at the University of Oxford. We also know that even the very instruments of ancient Greece were inspired by instruments that were used in Mesopotamia. So I think, thank you very much for this is just the thoughts that came out of my mind and were stimulated by Professor Güray's fascinating talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you Maria. Thank you very much.
Teşekkürler.
Biz teşekkür ederiz. Teşekkürler.
Thank you. So as far as I see, there are no other questions. If I'm not mistaken, Luca, I double check it and
no more questions. No more questions.
So maybe we can end our session with a few last words. Despite these circumstances, the pandemics, despite the global warming or temptations of relentless technology, despite still furious competitions in the societies, still lacking of intercultural understanding and harmony, we still believe in the humankind and wish you a peaceful, happy, healthy 2021. Hope that the world becomes a better place to live in and we can appreciate its merits, and music is on top of the list as far as I can say. See you in February 2021 with health and with joy. So wish you all a happy new year. So I just stuck with my last, sorry, it happens, the technology is always. Yeah, that's it. Okay, that was my last slide. So Happy New Year and Merry Christmas for Weihnachten. So we will be again in February with lots of interesting topics, starting from late antiquity till the post-Byzantine periods, including the Ottoman studies as well. So hope we'll see Nevin and Cenk Hoca once again, because it wasn't enough. I will just presume it as part 1, introduction to understanding Byzantine music. And we will have we need an advanced lecture on this. Thank you very much. So cordial thanks to all of you who could participate and devote their precious times with us all these months. That was not easy for all of us. So these were my last words. And my dear colleague Luca, do you have any last words?
Yeah, happy holidays to all of you. Thank you, Cenk Hoca. Thank you, Nevin Hoca. Good luck, Nevin Hoca, for your whole adventure. Sercan Hoca, happy holidays to you too.
Thank you very much.
Well deserved. And thank you to our wonderful crew of Byzantine and Ankara, Fermudegul Sevinç, Yunus Doğan, and Ayşe Mulawa helping us with the YouTube channel, posters, and everything. Thank you to our department, because my department chair is here, so I have to look good to him for the department help and support. Thank you so much. Happy holidays and take care.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye bye, everyone.
Good night. Bye bye.
Bye bye to all.
Thank you very much.